Namaste, you are listening to shravaNa, the Rashtram Podcast, and in this episode of shravaNa, we have Dr. Sampadananda Mishra, Professor and Chair of Sri Aurobindo Studies at Rashtram, speaking with Sri Ramachandra Roddam about the latter's experience of teaching as a guest faculty at the Rashtram Accelerator Programme, about the Bowels of Bengal, the Sahajiya Marga, and Sadhana. Stay tuned.
So, Namaskar, Ramachandra Ji, and welcome to you into the Rashtram School of Public Leadership podcast called shravaNa. So, at the outset, I would like to thank you for being with us, with the learners in the campus. The learners were extremely happy with your sessions, and I would like to start the discussion with you by asking how has been your experience with the learners.
Pranam Sampadananda Ji, and pranam to all the listeners of your podcast. It's been a great experience for me. I thank Rashtram team for inviting me to share my thoughts and experiences and enable a nurturing and nourishing experience for the learners for this program. And my experience has been one that of very deep engagement, because it was not the whole process of learning was not a matter of 2 hours a day or something. It was creating an immersion and engagement into overall experience. So that meant a very deep engagement with the learners, and so it involved, apart from 2 to 3 hours of classroom discussions, it involved one-on-ones with almost all the learners and getting their perspectives about what they are receiving in the class and overall contextualizing the teachings in the class to them specifically, to their life and what's happening. Apart from that, we have also asked their participation in yoga, early morning yoga sessions and the chanting sessions, pranayama sessions, and then we have all together established a Akhand Jyoti right from day 0. If I were to say, even before the session started, we invoked the presence of the Divine Mother, Durga, and we prayed to her to preside over this engagement process and this learning process, deep exchange process. And what it meant for the learners was to take a commitment and plunge into the commitment of safeguarding and being present with the light, the Jyoti, which was in the center of the class. And this happened, and by her grace, by the grace of the Divine Mother, the Akhand Jyoti sustained all through the period of Sankalpa of 5 days, and it got completed meaningfully and purposefully, and very we would call it a blessing that the baton of that light was handed over to Ganapati with the Ganapati festival. So that continued, the flame continued in that way. So to put it in a nutshell, it was a beautiful experience, and it was also an experience of deep learning for me, especially understanding the youngsters and what are their thought processes and how sadhana, which was the most important aspect to bring to them in these sessions, how it can play a role in creating a meaningful center in their lives.
Good. And you feel that sessions of this nature would help them in strengthening the learners from within and in shaping their character, shaping their future, and in the nation building, which has been the attempt here to infuse that whole spirit of nation building. So keeping this in the mind, so you feel that such sessions will help them?
Undoubtedly, it will help them. And what I see is my inputs during the last 1 week here are just a part of the bigger story that's going on here, and the vision the Rashtraam has, as an institute of leadership, and that certainly has bigger goals for them. And my inputs were for them to create an inward anchor in them so that they can achieve their ambitions and aspirations, and also at the same time be very realistic about their potentials and how to play with their strengths and how to optimize or mitigate some things, their limitations, or understand them better, come face to face with them, accept them. This in overall way affects their quality of experiencing life. That was my essence. Now, how to affect in a positive way, conscious way, quality of experiencing the overall life. So this is where I think it will add value, my engagement, and this, in my view, will provide them to some extent clarity in generating inner direction, which will anchor them for their future work and wherever they're going.
Okay. So this was good, and I wanted to hear it from you, your experience with the learners, which is good. Now I would like you to speak a little bit about your own journey. How did it start, and what was your state prior to your sadhana? What you were doing, and then what inspired you, or what pulled you into this realm of sadhana that you are pursuing now?
In terms of the timeline, if I were to put my sadhana orientation, primarily it would be approximately 7 to 8 years. That would be roughly the curve of my sadhana, which only got intensified more and more, and got a sharper focus, if I may say, in the last 3 years. It got a sharper focus on what I want to do specifically and how I can proceed. And I think that much amount of time it takes for a seeker to figure out what is the path and where one is arriving at based on their own temperament, their own proclivities, and their own nature. But my overall aspiration for sadhana has been there for a long time. I think maybe from childhood, if I were to remember, because I was somebody who was getting always drawn to anything that is spiritual and in nature. And my earliest remembrance is that of attending Arati of Sri Ramakrishna Thakur, in the Ramakrishna Mission in Hyderabad. And Swami Vivekananda has been a constant inspiration right from the early childhood or younger days, I would say. I think at the age of 9 or 10, I picked up his small booklet called Rebuild India. And again, so he as a personality, as a sage, as a saint, and a great leader with a great vision, all of this as a blend inspired my imagination all through. And his connection with master, and my question was, who is this great man and who is his master and who is his guru? And when I looked at Sri Ramakrishna, he was the Kali Upasaka. So that really strengthened my orientation towards Devi and Kali in general. That said and done, then as it happens in life, I came into Satya Sai fold, Sri Satya Sai Baba's fold, who is my Param Guru. And I came into his fold, and ever since then, it was probably even 23, 24 years ago, that's how I came into his fold, and I was just probably 17, 18 years. And this resulted in Sai Baba always gave, Swami, and we call him, always gave an orientation towards service and seva. So that was very instrumental because that also gelled with me in my readings and in my inspirations from Swami Vivekananda. So this was broadly the phase of prior to sadhana, but most importantly during this phase, another addition of my spiritual inclination and spiritual foundations, if I were to say, happened because of my learning about Sri Aurobindo and his philosophy and mother, when I discovered them more. And
That was in which year?
This I would say was in the year of 2003. I picked up a book on essays on Gita, and which, without having any idea, it was my father's collection, and I was pursuing my post graduation to Bangalore, and I said I need to carry some good book, an inspirational book with me, and so I took this book because it was on Bhagavad Gita, and there on the first page my father wrote one of the famous quotes of Swami Vivekananda, which roughly I paraphrase and I don't remember exactly, but wherein he says something like, you need to have the strong blood coursing through your veins to understand the essence of Gita. And that was very, provoking and inspiring at the same time. So I said, oh my God, so then I should read this book without understanding whose book it was, Sri Aurobindo's book, not knowing much. Then I started reading that book, and obviously Sri Aurobindo's thoughts are, for a beginner like that, are difficult to comprehend. I was only fascinated with the length of his sentences, and I used to read and not understand anything, but I used to read count the number of words between two full stops. Oh my God, 42 words in a sentence, 53 words in a sentence, like that. But because of some mysterious grace, I would call it the grace of Sri Aurobindo himself in my faith, that after 7-8 months, which I persisted, not giving up reading that book, suddenly some sense started entering in me, that I've started connecting with the book, able to understand some aspects of it. From there on, the journey never stopped. In fact, I read only Sri Aurobindo and nothing else for maybe easily 3 to 4 years. No other book. Everything always related with Sri Aurobindo only. So Life Divine, Savitri, and all of that. And I had immense amount of experiences reading that way. And a lot of experiences at a mental level, at an emotional level, at every level. After which I started opening up my Swadhyaya to the scriptures and the traditional texts. So I would say there was never a moment whenever I read even our scriptures, never a moment that I went away from Sri Aurobindo's views of the light, the light he would put on the scriptures. So he was a constant inspiration and companion in all my pursuit of Swadhyaya and knowledge. After which, I had the more dedicated approach towards sadhana, and I took up that, and it was all orienting towards Divine Mother only, because the thoughts on Divine Mother by Sri Aurobindo also, impacted me very positively, very deeply.
So, at present, where lies your focus?
My focus, I think, it has a twofold approach, and one is and my own journey of quest and sadhana brought me to the fold of the Baul Tradition, which is one of the most ancient Bhakti Yoga traditions of India, especially emerging from Bengal, the northeastern region, and that is where right now I'm serving and doing my seva as a administrator, as a trustee of an organization which is enabling and founding the learning process of through Gurukula system in the modern times of the Baul tradition. We have our ashram, Sanatan Siddhashram, founded in the name of our Param Guru Sri Sanatan Das Baul, who has given the responsibility of creating an educational center, a Gurukula, a practicing, a sadhana space, all of this, an archival space, all this put together. He gave this responsibility to his disciple, his foremost disciple, I must say, Srimati Parvati Baul. Under her guidance, we do this work, and that is where my primary, if I can use the phrase, investment of my energies and my thoughts and making that happen, that is my primary focus. It also happens through my own sadhana. I have written many articles on philosophy, spirituality, and various aspects related with Bharatiya, Adhyatmikata, and culture. That has brought me more and more close to the potential of teaching and sharing my knowledge and sharing my thoughts and sharing my experiences through sadhana, which have come primarily through experiences of sadhana, and trying to bring more sharp focus for those who are the seekers and who would like to make sadhana a fulcrum for their life, so that will become the center. So any such opportunity that comes, I am open to teach in those lines. And the first such opportunity that came was from Rashtram. So I see going forward these two dual aspects, playing a role. Even within our ashram, I take up often sharing talks and also some amount of teaching and nurturing in this direction. So that's kind of a inherent aspect.
No, that's good. And the Baul tradition, and now of course it is listed in the UNESCO representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So, how is Baul tradition seen by the other traditions?
Other traditions, like, if you could
other say religious traditions or folk traditions.
So one thing is, often there is,
or even by the general public.
Okay. So one of the biggest challenges that prevails for the Baul tradition is misperception in the public, understanding that it is a folk tradition. I have to make a very clear distinction that, because Bowls are essentially encountered by the general public in the trains, in the Shantiniketan, near and around Shantiniketan, while people are traveling from, say, Kolkata to North Bengal. So Bowls come singing the philosophy of the Bowl into the trains. That's where the great number of people meet the Bowls. They are doing their Maduguri. They are giving the poetic insights of their practice. And in turn, they get something.
What is Madhukari?
Madhukari, it can be said, it is honey gathering. Madhu, and they are gathering honey. It is a very integral part of ancient Baul tradition. It is also part of many other traditions. Similarly, they are there in south of India. Where the practitioners do akashvritti, means they are not planning their income, revenue, etc., all of that. They are just stepping out and singing the Harinam, going and singing, chanting the Harinam in the villages and the lanes, in the houses of the householders, and by purifying and consecrating the space by chanting the Harinam. And in turn, villagers might give some rice, vegetables that they grow. So it is that, of nature. So Dasa Sampradaya also did, for instance, in the southern part of India, and many other similar Sampradayas, devotional Bhakti Parampara Sampradayas are there even in the central and the western India. So they have also done the same, and they receive this, and this is how they sustain their livelihood. This process is called Madhukuri, collecting honey, gathering.
Madhukari
Vritti. So this forms the most central aspect to the Bowls and to this tradition. And they receive this and they sustain their akhada. Their ashrams are called akhadas. And it's like a very simple setup. Just the sadhaka is there, the Baul master, with their practitioner, the companion practitioner, sadhika, they call Sadhana Sangini. And they do their spiritual practice, and whichever community they are living in, it's a benefit for the community because they are the sadhaks. So the community members come to them in the evenings, they sit and they sing the spiritual wisdom. And these songs are called Mahajaner Pad, written by the Mahajan, the saints of the Baul. After doing their yoga sadhana, after doing their sadhana, from there they receive the insights and they compose this poetry and share the wisdom. And it's a very comprehensive philosophical system also, in the sense it has many tattvas, Guru Tattva, Radha Tattva, like this Deha Tattva. And so each of these expositions go deep into understanding the philosophy, what they follow in their path. So this is broadly, is...
When you say ancient, you used the word ancient now in connection with the Baul. So the Baul was in its peak, you can say, late 19th or early 20th century. So how do you look at the whole history of Baul tradition? Did it have its own course of evolution, or from certain source it made a shift? What were the other sampradayas, or are the other sampradayas with which you can link the Baul sampradaya?
So first thing is, it would be difficult to say when exactly what it was its peak. I think its peak could have been even little much earlier than 19th, 20th century also. It has its roots, it is believed, even in my learnings, that is what I have discovered, that it has its roots to a great extent in the Sahajiya tradition of the Bauddha path.
Sahajiya tradition of Bauddha.
So Sahajiya tradition within the Bauddha, so Sahajiyana, it used to be called. It comes under the Bauddha traditions again in their own seeking. Broadly have these three aspects of Hinayana, which is their originator, principles, and then Mahayana, which is the path of Madhyamika, which is Madhyamika Prasangika and Nagarjuna's expositions in the Nalanda and that phase, and that during that time itself they have entered into the phase of Mantrayana, where mantra and mandalas started becoming important. Then came another cycle, the big chakra, which is called as the Vajrayana. So Vajrayana, where it was very actively engaged in the tantric schools during that time. So this was roughly around 7th to 8th centuries. It started getting in, and it peaked for until 11th to 12th century. And eastern part of India was primarily the thing, and it has its origins and sources more from Orissa. And in Orissa we have a practitioner, and who is considered as the Siddha of the Baul, and the Sahajiya Siddhas is the Lakshminkara. And Lakshminkara, and so that is the region, the kingly, the province. So this was almost like the origin, and from here under the Vajrayana you have again various Kalachakrayana and various other subsects of that. Sahajiyana is there. Their philosophy was primarily that don't get too much into rituals. The essence is accessible just like that. And do not discard the body as the transient. Body is the vehicle. So the focus on the Deha Tattva was important. And because body is important, then the Hatha Yoga practices became extremely important as part of the process. And it said the Guru Parampara is extremely important. Guru is everything in your path. Though as the Bauddha Mata, the Shunya and Mahasukha are the ones which are their primary aims. But the Guru Parampara became extremely important. So all these certain aspects are reflected later on, even in the Bauls, the central principles. And this journey happened. After that we have invasions, happening around 13th, 14th century onwards. It was a very tumultuous time for our traditions that emerged on the Bharatiya soil. And so I must say, while the Sahajiyana was evolving, it is very evident that the Natha Parampara and the Natha Siddhas are also evolving, so much so that there is an overlap between the Sahaja Siddhacharyas and the Natha Siddhacharyas of the Hindu Dharmic Paramparas and traditions. So, like for instance, Gorakshanath of the Nath Siddha Parampara, all of them also have written poetry. So Sahajiyas were also writing poetry of their spiritual experiences. So this was a pristine time of expressing their spiritual journey, which was not just devotional in nature, but their yogic experiences into poetry. So that's what was happening during that time. So all of this was getting obviously challenged because of the invasions. And I wouldn't go deep into what was the origination of the Gaudiya Vaishnavism and all of that, but it picked up the momentum with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu coming onto the scene. So he, or under his guidance, and actually one of the most important, personalities who comes in the spiritual masters is Nityananda Mahaprabhu. And Swami Nityananda was like a collaborator of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He himself was from the Avadhut Panthi and Avadhut Marga before he got his guidance from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he always had this feeling of including everybody, and especially these traditions which are now under severe attack and they are not having a shelter. He brought them under the shelter of the Vaishnavism then. And he also guided his son Veerabhadra to do it. So Veerabhadra Goshai. So Swami Sri Nityananda and Veerabhadra Goshai, they become extremely important originators of the Vaishnava Sahajiya now. The Sahajiya became Vaishnava Sahajiya.
So you had the Buddhist Sahajayana and then the Vaishnava Sahajiya.
Buddhist Sahajayana, and those practitioners were taken into the Vaishnava Sahajiya fold. That more or less, in my learnings, I have to emphasize that in my study and in my learnings, seems to be like the mother bed tradition for many other subsects that came later on. So like the Bowls and the Karta Baja and the Fakiri tradition, because also the Sufi traditional devotional practices were also present around that time. So all of them were given shelter under this. So the Fakirs wearing the Tulsi Mala and singing up the praise of the Krishna also. All of this is even now still prevalent in some parts of northeastern, or the eastern part of India, or then erstwhile undivided Bengal in India. So all of these traditions emerged out of this, and Bowls also came through from there specifically. So essentially these are the yogis of the heart, and they are there to find the connection with what they call man of the heart, Moner Manush, and which very strongly resembles with the aspect of psychic being, the Chaitya Purusha of Sri Aurobindo, with an emphasis on the devotional dimension in this. And they are the yogis of this, connecting with this joyous divine spark in the heart and letting it lead the life. And that emerged into the Vaishnava Sahajiya and the Baul traditions and all of that.
So, what are some of the important features of the Baul that you would like to mention?
As I have said, one is they are accepting the body. They are not in the denial of the body as an illusion. So Deha Tattva talks a lot about the body as the vehicle for your sadhana. All your spiritual experiences, everything, if the body is not there, they are non-existent for practical purposes. All your spiritual accomplishments and attainments and everything. It is not to establish the primacy of the body, but is to emphasize how body is a vehicle. Deha Tattva. It is a vehicle. It is an essential vehicle. So that becomes an extremely important aspect. Another important aspect is that of a yoga. That usually in the bhakti traditions, traditional bhakti traditions, even such as the Gaudiya Vaishnavism, even started by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, those exclusive traditions within that fold do not emphasize so much the necessity of realizing yourself through yogic practices as any base for your spiritual sadhana. For those traditions, Krishna is everything. To be in relationship with Krishna and to be in union and unite with Krishna or serve Krishna as the Gopika or as the Dasa, these become important. For the Vaishnava Sahajiya traditions, given they had already established connection with the yogic practices of the Sahajiya path or the Nath Parampara, so they did not discard that aspect. For them, establishing relationship with your essential self was very important. However, you should recognize that within the Bauddha thought, there is no essential self. That is the difference where it clearly demarcates. Within the Sahajiya traditions that have formed the Baul, there is self. There is not only self, there is that self is called Sahaj Manush. Sahaj Manush is a transcendental being, the source for everything, who is also living on the 7-storied building, the Saptatala, which is the 7 chakras, yogically speaking. And that Sahaj Manush is residing as Moner Manush in the heart. So this so much aligns with our Vedic, Vedantic and Upanishadic scheme of things. And so it is very much in favor of self as an experience. The self is the central aspect. So this becomes another important dimension for the Bowls. So to realize that Moner Manush and allow that to lead the life in complete union and joy and devotion and surrender as an offering, the whole life as a prayer, the whole life as an offering. Our Param Guru Sri Sanatana Das Thakur used to say, when asked what should be the objective for the sadhaka, make your whole life a prayer. That was his statement. So that sort of sums up what is the bhava with which Bowls lead their sadhana. So this aspect becomes extremely important for them. And the other aspects of satsang, being in the satsang, doing the Maduguri, practices of Maduguri, and transacting the spiritual knowledge with the world and the society and sharing this wisdom. So all of this becomes extremely important. Most importantly, how they are seen as the singers and dancers of the folk tradition, right? So now we know, through this talk, we have seen that they are the yogis, essentially. They are doing even Hatha Yoga, very, very deep Hatha Yoga practices. Breath becomes extremely important as part of their practice. And their sadhana with breath becomes. So they call, in a way, Baul is called Vyatul, or even that has some sound connected with this wind. And not only the wind that creates madness. So they become Kepa, Kepi. These are the crazy ones, the mad ones, and the divinely intoxicated ones. All of these become central aspects, the yogic aspects. And even these have influenced some of the great spiritual practitioners and the great gurus like Sri Anirvan, who has incorporated some of these aspects in his own philosophy, what he taught later. So that is these are some of these essential aspects of Baul, and I think covered broadly.
Okay, so they use a particular instrument called ektara and sometimes the dubki.
Correct.
So, is there any deeper significance of why ektara or dubki? Or it's just
No, everything has significance, very deep philosophical, spiritual significance. Ektara, the way is seen, the single string which is running through is the sushumna. And the base of the ektara, if one observes, it's like the body, the adhara. And the two other sticks which are going right up along with sushumna are the ida and pingala nadis. All of them unite with Krishna at the top. So that is the significance of ektara. And they use the rhythms of the dubki as well as the nupur. All of them are an integral part of the Ashtasattvic bhava or Ashtasattvic experiences that are experienced even by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when someone is in a divine intoxication, they hear these sounds of the Brahmari, of the bee and all of that. So Bowls have adopted all of those as part of their accompanying instruments in their singing process. And they are singing about this divine intoxication and joy. And not only this, in general, they are singing specific tattvas. And not all Bowls can sing any tattva. There is a gradation, of the pravartaka, the beginner, then the sadhaka, then the siddha, and then they transcend this. So pravartaka and siddha can sing certain things. Pravartaka can sing only something called as mano tattva or mano tattva, let's say, and which is basically reflecting the questions of life. How to lead this life? Am I wasting this life? What is the purpose of life? The beginner questions, for the seeking. Explorations and reflections. And as it gets deeper, it gets into Deha Tattva, Sadhana Tattva, how to do sadhana, what does the sadhana significance mean, what are these chakras, what are these yogic aspects, and what is the devotional aspect. Then the Radha Tattva, Radha Bhava, is there. Then, so like this, various tattvas, and it requires, and they present their singing in the mahotchavs and the satsangs in front of the senior Baul sadhaks who are goshais, who are scholars also. There are some Baul sadhaks who do not have to sing. but they can compose poetry out of their sadhana, and they are the scholars who know the complete scholarship of the philosophy. So they present their songs in front of them, and they will then tell, is your yoga, is your sadhana ripening or not? This is the way, very systematic undercurrent way of progress is there laid out in the sadhana.
So you said Ektara, Dubki and Nupur. So these are the three instruments which are used.
Primarily these are the ones. Sometimes they use Dotara and some other instrument. They also use Ananda Lahari.
What is that?
Ananda Lahari is a string. It's a semi. It's not string exactly. It's like the dubki, and there is a string that comes out of it, and you play. It's you have to see this to understand, and it is also a accompanying instrument primarily, and that also they use. They have wide spectrum of instruments, but the primary ones and most dominant ones are dubki, nupur, ektara, and they use Ananda Lahari, and now Dotara they are using. Unfortunately, the songs and their songs are so simple in their explanation about the complexities of life. Fortunately, that has made them accessible to the masses. So as a simple village person, I sit at the Baul Masters gathering, and I get to contemplate philosophy of life, because their metaphors are so simple. Right? They are talking about the body like a pot, and like the Upanishads have also spoken about it, all of that in a song form in Bengali. Right? So I connect, and I also philosophize, I also contemplate. But the same songs in the modern context, what has happened, they have become popular songs. And everybody is singing them on the stage with the guitar and drums and everything, and they are also thinking they are bowls. They might be singing the songs, but for that there needs to be a proper Guru Sishya Parampara, initiation, practice, and getting a consent and approval from several sadhakas, in the sadhu gathering. All of this is extremely important.
Now, if you look at the different bhakti traditions, the bhaktas, there's an enormous amount of literature, bhakti literature, which is created. So, who are the composers of these songs? And is there specific Baul literature?
So there is one it's called Nirgrantik tradition, or it's more oral tradition. It's been a very much an oral tradition. However, there are some granthas of the Vaishnava Sahajiya Parampara, which I said, the confluence of during that time. So great many masters who were the direct descendants and disciples of Nityananda Mahaprabhu onwards, they have written the texts and interpreted the bhakti aspects and the bhakti traditional aspects in this way of looking at the yoga and the bhakti yoga or the yoga bhakti tradition. And they have written Amrita Rasa Ratnavali, and many other books are there. Some of them are directly in the Bengali, where they explore more about the sadhana aspect. However, major amount of passing the knowledge is from Guru to Sishya. It is all there archived in the body, in the practice. So they are like the moving archives. So it will be interesting to know that some of the Baul masters know probably 1,000 songs or 1,500 songs or something like that. Everything, all the wisdom is through memory.
Okay, but those 1,000 or 1,500 songs are not recorded anywhere.
They are popular through the practice in the traditions. Many people know many of these songs. 1,000. They are not just 1,000 and 1,500. I'm just talking about one practitioner. It could run into I don't know how many thousands and thousands of songs, or even into lakhs of songs, and because they have been continuously composing, incessantly composing these songs.
Okay. So can you name some of the present Baul masters?
Present Baul masters is definitely Srimati Parvati Baul, who is leading our ashram. She is very recognized world over, and then we have masters, teachers such as, especially we have Damodar Goshai, who lives as a Goshai, who is not a singer but who is a scholar and who is like the teacher even for the Bauls. So if they have to learn the tattvas, not only tattvas, how to lead a life like a Baul with the rituals and the traditions to be held. These are the masters who inform, how to and teach people the yogic aspects. We have Mahananda Goshai, Mahananda Goshai, who is also concerning that same lineage. And then we have Devdas Baul, who is very, very popular Baul master in Shantiniketan in Bolpur, very popular Baul master. We have Kanaidas Baul, who is a Shakta Baul, who is the Bhakta of the Devi, unlike Krishna Bhakta, who lives in Tarapet and who is also very eminent. And I would request the listeners to do listen to these master songs. They are even available on YouTube. Kanai Baba, we call him sweetly Kanai Baba, and he calls the Smashan of Tarapet as his office. And he sits there and sings the wisdom of the Bauls. Like this, we have many masters, even now, very good masters who are practicing. We have Lakshman Das Baul, who is also teaching now, and who is a very great singer of the Baul poetry. Now he is very well recognized, like this. And in this Srimati Parvati Baul, Parvati Ji got recognized for her human contribution and being the upholder of the tradition for over more than 2 decades under the Guru Shishya Parampara through Sangeet Natak Academy Award in the year 2019. Honorable President of India, felicitated her as part of this.
So, how do we look at the future of this tradition? Not just how is it going to exist, but also like how is it contributing towards the progressive evolution of humanity, or even to the spiritual tradition or the sadhana tradition.
It will be definitely, one is about its presence, its continuation in the current context of modernity. It will be, I think, in my view, making some adaptations and adjustments no matter what. That is how the traditions have survived, by somehow considering the Desha Kala Patra or the Kala Pravaha, and made necessary adjustments to keep flowing and continuing. I think such adaptations will happen. I think already in the last century or so, or less than century, or primarily 70-80 years, in the post-independent India, it has come more and more accessible to the common public conscience, on the Baul, awareness about Baul. There are many people who approach towards Baul very from a distinct perspectives. Especially it definitely brings out a certain element of unity. The aspect of harmony is very, very essential. So everybody who is a seeker of this aspect, they get very deeply attracted towards Baul and its philosophy. It's talking about love, it's talking about devotion, it's talking about harmony. It is talking about not just these aspects as some mental concepts, but it has a deep yogic process to offer people to learn how to cultivate these aspects and experience them and manifest them. So that itself is a huge contribution, in terms of it. And its wisdom, I think its wisdom itself is a contribution for people to contemplate and derive, many, many insights in enhancing the quality of their own life, the spiritual quest. And especially those who are very devotionally driven in the path of the seeking, they deeply anchor and they deeply get attracted to Baul. And inherently it is non-sectarian in nature by virtue of being a confluence of traditions itself. It has been, Baul is a standing testimony that how truly traditions and sampradayas evolve. Though we want to attach absolute notion of purity to every tradition, that my tradition is very pure, it has been like right from its genesis, it has been like this and all that. But honestly speaking, in the travel of the time, every tradition has adopted some new thoughts and new aspects from adjacent traditions, and like that the extent. And Baul stands as a testimony for that. Given inherently, it has an aspect of Tantra, it has an aspect of the devotion, it has an aspect of the Krishna Bhakti and the Vaishnava aspect, it has an aspect of the Hatha Yoga from the Natha Parampara or the Sahajiyas, and deep alchemical practices as part of the body and the Deha Tattva, and all of this, they have this inherently a tendency of non-sectarianism. They do not appreciate, and they do not really talk about sect. Sect being the Bowel being the topmost sect or something like that. They don't do. They don't have such an articulation. This in itself attracts many people. Now especially the world is seeking, I think, such answers right now. So somehow this attracts many people. Having said that, Bowls do make it a point that just by liking the poetry and loving the philosophy, one does not necessarily become the Baul. It's a traditional path. Proper initiations have to take place, and the Guru Sishya Parampara has to be established. And that means tradition means a commitment and responsibility on the learners to further contribute to the tradition by being the practitioner and furthering the objective and propagating the dharma of the tradition.
Do you remember any Baul song?
Okay, my Bengali and my remembrance is very, very...
So if you can, the most favorite one, and then explain also the meaning little bit.
That will be very difficult for me to do,
the essence of that.
There are many songs whose essence I can reflect. For instance, there is this song which I was telling on the Sahaj Manush, which is talking about Sahaj Manush is that man, that Manush, that being who does not have hands but can hold, who does not have feet but can walk, who is mute and dumb but can speak, who is blind but can see. This is that Manush who is beyond the understanding of your perceptions and your approach of cognizing and knowing about the world and the reality. This knowing is different knowing. Where is this Manush located in us? He is on the Saptatala, who is above the 7 stories, who is seated above the head. That is where is his residence and abode. So that to realize that Sahaj Manush is the goal of the life of the Baul, and do that.
So the Baul songs are highly symbolic, and one needs to understand the metaphors of
metaphorical.
What is Saptatal?
Yeah.
What is
Correct. This is called Sandhya Bhasha, which is twilight language, wherein there is, like the Vedas, the Upanishads, there is something that has been said externally in the form. Only the practitioner can go to the deeper layers. Just by being a scholar and I read something about this, I will not unravel fully. And each of these have symbolism. For instance, almost like the Mandukya Upanishad, if I have to say, there is a song which is Keba Guma Keba Jage. Who is the one who is sleeping? Who is the one who is awake? And what happens to this world when the sleep comes? When this one goes into the sleep? Will it be there? Will it not be there? The profundity of questions, right? This is almost like Mandukya Upanishad.
The quest that many seekers, Upanishadic seekers had, these kinds of questions. Okay, and they have always a double meaning. Like externally, you can have one meaning, and then the practitioners carry the deeper meaning in which helps them growing from within and then doing their practice. Very interesting, and your association with this Sanatan Siddhasarma, where you have met the founder of
Parvati Baul,
Srimati
Parvati Baul.
And Sanatan Goswami.
Sanatan Das Baul. Sanatan Das Thakur or Sanatan Das Baul. He is our Param Guru, who is Guru of Parvati Ji.
Okay.
And he lived all his life in Bankura.
Bankura.
In Bengal. And I had an opportunity in 2014 to visit his ashram and be there. And he blessed me to do and kind of gave adesha to do the seva for the ashram and build the ashram, found this ashram, serve it. So that is where this my path and my journey began. Though I'm learning a little bit of, I understand Baul songs to some extent, and I'm learning Bengali, and that becomes the literature, the ability, language obviously becomes an extremely important aspect to understand deeper. Yeah.
No, very good. I mean, there is a lot of learning from this discussion with you about this tradition. You want to give any particular message to the youth of India?
Well, the only message I can give to the youth of India is do not discard your roots thinking that they are irrelevant. Try to find your roots and understand them. You don't have to blindly respect them, but one will understand that those connections have strong implications in your own development and growth and progress, whatever you define the purpose and meaning of your life. And for this, if one needs to do sadhana, one needs to understand one's own culture and civilization. And I always emphasize on sadhana to be done, because the roots, essentially all roots lead to some form of the other of manifestation of adhyatmikata, spirituality. And spirituality cannot be accessed without anubhuti and experience. And anubhuti and experience cannot emerge in one's heart unless there is practice and sadhana. What is the form and nature of the practice and sadhana, you will discover in your own quest. And by trying to understand one's own roots, there is never a conflict, which is an artificial conflict that is made as if we are not searching for the truth, but we are searching for identity. My conviction is that our true identity is truth. So if you go back to who you are in identity, through roots, through your tradition, through your culture, you will again come back to the same truth what you are searching for. You are not going away from it. And this will form a very strong basis for future, not only for yourself, for the nation, the collective, the society. And we will be more vibrant nation who is able to manifest the strengths of our tradition and culture for the contemporary times and overcome the limitations which we have borne all these years and the ages. That would also be a parallel work in the process of this quest, the inner quest.
Dhanyavad. I think we had a good discussion.
Dhanyavad.
And then we look forward to have you here more often to guide.
I too look forward to come back, Sampaji, and share my thoughts with the students in whatever way.
Thank you.
Dhanyavad. Pranam.
You've been listening to shravaNa, the Rashtram Podcast. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation. Watch this space, subscribe to our channel, like it and share it with your family and friends, and comment on our content to let us know what you think. Follow Rashtram on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Rashtram SPL. Visit rashtram.org for more.